Hello, I am Professor Kino and welcome to my Office of Cinematic Antiquity. Today we will be talking about... I think it's safe to say that the Predator franchise has never been a critical darling. Even the original 1987 film, which has developed a large following today, was not too well received upon its initial release. However, when Shane Black signed on to direct the latest entry, The Predator, it seemed that this trend might finally change. Black had previous connections and a personal investment to the Predator franchise due to his role as Hawkins in the original film, and he proved that he has a solid writing and directing talent with 2005's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and 2016's The Nice Guys. If there was anyone who could resuscitate this franchise, it seemed like it would be Black. And I have to admit, I was one such person who was excited for this film because of this. I am not a Predator purist, but I have always found the Predator films to be fun B-action sci-fi thrill rides with a really cool creature at their core. And now that I've finally seen the latest film, The Predator, I hope to answer one simple question. Was Black actually able to reinvigorate this beloved cult franchise? Premise. After witnessing firsthand that aliens exist, military sniper Quinn McKenna is thrust into a scenario that puts him against both a government agency that wants to keep him quiet and a creature that is intent on hunting him, his family, and the ragtag group of misfits that side with him. Writing. I should start off by saying that I thought the first half of this film was, on average, really fun, and plays a lot like a B-action sci-fi thriller from the late 80s or early 90s. There were some great Predator action scenes, the characters had great chemistry and were actually pretty funny, the film was flowing at a relatively solid pace, and I was really getting into it. But then, about the time when a second bigger Predator turns up, the whole thing starts to go off the rails a bit. Characters start to show up at certain places or know certain things with little or no build-up or explanation, and things just sort of start to happen for the sake of the plot. Some things just occur, and if you aren't on board with it, you will just be shaking your head slightly confused. Additionally, while the Predator is supposed to be the main threat of this film, he seems to take a backseat to the government agency for a chunk of it. For a while, I was on the edge of my seat, wondering when the main characters were going to start being killed off, as is characteristic in the Predator franchise, only to find myself continuously waiting. In fact, there were plenty of times when I was convinced that the Predator was going to kill someone, only to have him not. And the main characters don't even start getting killed until the final third or perhaps even fourth of the film, and this is a little disappointing. In a Predator film, the Predator is supposed to be able to strike and kill anyone at any second all the time, but this is just not the case here. And this film is filled with so many great set pieces that would have been awesome to see the Predator hunting in. A research facility / military base, a suburb, a school, etc. But we don't ever really see him doing his thing until the characters are all in the middle of the woods in the middle of nowhere near the end of the film. And at this point, it just becomes a series of quick action exchanges in which the characters die off in quick succession until one final cliché showdown between Quinn and the Predator. So in the end, as a Predator film, The Predator does not really deliver. And finally, the film does not really have a satisfying ending. Yes, all the main conflicts of the film are resolved by the end, but the film does not really have a resolution. There is a single few-minute scene that occurs right after the final showdown that is nice, but then the film jumps straight into a sequence that should have been one of two things: an after-credits teaser or the beginning of a whole new film. However, because the sequence was placed at the end of the movie right before the credits, it feels out of place and robs the whole film of a satisfying conclusion. So, in summary, what starts off as a fun 80s-90s B-action sci-fi thriller with entertaining characters and some cool Predator sequences spirals into a bit of a mess with a lot of Deus Ex Machina, a disappointing amount of the titular Predator, and an unsatisfying conclusion. Acting. While the writing is a little bit of a mixed bag, one thing that this film shines in is its cast. First is Quinn and his ragtag team, aka Boyd Holbrook as Quinn McKenna, Trevante Rhodes as Nebraska Williams, Keegan-Michael Key as Coyle, Thomas Jane as Baxley, Alfie Allen as Lynch, and Augusto Aguilera as Nettles. The chemistry here is superb. They are funny, they are badass, and I found myself rooting for all of them to survive. If there is anything you should watch this film for, it is definitely these guys. As for the other characters, the standouts are definitely Sterling K. Brown as Will Traeger, the head of the government agency after Quinn and the Predator, who is equally funny, although in a more villainous way, and Jacob Tremblay as Rory, Quinn's son, who shows off that his star performance in Room was not a one-time thing. And as for the final central character, Olivia Munn as Casey Brackett, a biologist who was studying the predators, I found good. Not as standout as the rest of the cast, but perfectly capable for her part. I have been hearing that she is getting a lot of flack for her performance, but I personally don't see where the people are coming from. She is fine here. Costumes, hair, and makeup. Each of the main characters has their own unique look that helps to differentiate them from each other. Nothing too flashy, but definitely noticeable enough to make everyone feel unique, which is something that I always like in a film. But the standout here is really the Predator himself. As a creature, he has always had an excellent prosthetic design, and this film, for the most part, maintains that. While the second bigger Predator does use a lot of CGI, which doesn't look as nice, the prosthetics and costumes of the first Predator and what is done with costumes and prosthetics of the second one is pristine. Set design. Fun, but underutilized. There are schools, suburbs, forests, labs, military bases, and spaceships, but none of them are really explored enough to be considered excellent. I enjoyed seeing them on screen, and the fact that they were all in the same film made the whole thing feel unique, but nothing ever happened in any one of them, like a unique action scene, to make me go like, oh man, that suburb scene was so cool. They were all just there. So design-wise, pretty cool, but utilization of them, mediocre. Choreography. I would say hit and miss. There is plenty of action, and while a lot of it is good, it is not so across the board. For instance, there was a really cool fight between two predators that is really cool to see and is handled excellently. Each of the predators has a different fighting style based on their size and arsenal, and so the final product is entertaining. However, on the opposite end of the spectrum, some of the times people are frantically running from and shooting at a predator just ends up feeling like a hectic blur of gunshots and violence. In fact, there were a couple times when some people died and I wasn't sure if it was any of the main characters or just nameless grunts, and then I found out it was a combination of the two. So while some of the choreography is cool, it also can at times feel non-existent. Cinematography. The cinematography here is fine. There are some good shots, such as some cool predator kills and character deaths, but nothing that really stands out in my mind as fantastic, especially compared to some shots from earlier Predator films. So not bad, but not great. Editing. During non-action scenes, I found this fine. Conversations were handled professionally, and it was done well enough to let the humor come to life. But during action scenes, it had a tendency to get really hectic. Cutting all over the place can be a useful trick at times, but when you cut around so fast that you aren't really 100% sure which character you just saw die, it's a little problematic. This isn't a consistent problem, but I'd be lying if I said the editing here was great. CGI. For the most part, this is really good. The CGI on the Predator ships and technology, including the Predator vision, is stupendous and crisp. However, this cannot be said for all the CGI, particularly regarding the second bigger Predator. While at times he does look stunning, at other times he seems a little clunky and obviously CGI. So on a whole, the CGI is pretty good, but not perfect. Music. I actually like this a lot. It was present, it was intense, it was fun, and it really set the mood of the film. Is it something that I would listen to on its own? No, but it really did fit with the film nicely. Direction. It definitely seems like Shane Black had a ton of fun directing this film, and I can tell that through the way that the cast seems to bond together on screen and deliver great performances. However, it also feels like Black got a little carried away at trying to make something that was fresh, unexpected, and able to start a franchise. While I'm not sure which was Black's idea and which was Fox's idea, the final product just feels a little bit convoluted and, at some points, rushed. And that is a bit of a shame, because a classic Predator story about some people on the run from a creature that is hunting them with this cast of characters would have made for such a great time. So sadly, I will have to answer my first question by saying that I don't think that this film will be enough to get the Predator franchise back on its feet. My enjoyment. I opened this review by saying how I was not a Predator purist, but how I liked the character of the Predator. So all in all, I did have fun with this movie in a way that you only can with a B movie. Because that is what this film is. A full-on 80s-90s B-action sci-fi thriller full of the plot contrivances, ridiculousness, and one-liners that can be expected with it. Yes, it is a bit convoluted, and yes, it does have a ton of issues, but I still found it fun. And I really did love the cast of characters. I'm not going to say that this is a masterpiece by a long shot, but I'm actually kind of excited to see it again, albeit this time among friends and beer. Recommendations. Your enjoyment level of this film will hinder on one specific thing, and that is expectation. Because when it gets right down to it, this film feels more like a Shane Black film that just happens to have Predator in it, as opposed to a Predator film directed by Shane Black. If you were hoping for the latter, you will definitely come out of the theater disappointed. But if you were more interested in the former, then you might actually have a good time. If I had to compare The Predator to another film, I'd actually go so far as to say that this film felt a lot like if Super 8's cast were all adults, and the alien was replaced with Predator. So if you were interested in a fun 80s, 90s sci-fi action thrill ride full of blood and language, then this film might be for you. Otherwise, you may just want to watch something else instead. Thanks for watching, I hope you liked it. If you did, leave a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I am Professor Kino, and I look forward to our next discussion.